Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're gonna have a look at the last remaining proper muscle car, and this is of course the Dodge Challenger. This specifically is the 2016 RT. So what I want to do in this video is talk about the design of this thing, the proper muscle car proportions from the front, side and rear, and talk about the interior details and all the little attention to detail that Dodge put in when they designed this car to bring it back to the 60s and 70s. And then of course we're gonna go out and take it for a drive. To me, the front end of the Challenger is one of these front ends that just screams move over when you see this in the rear view mirror, with the extremely wide front end graphics and these angry halo lights right here and the graphics in the middle, bringing it back to the 60s and 70s. It's such a cool design. The thing with this car is that it started its development back in 2004. That's 18 years ago, and it still looks like a modern car, and people are still buying this, even though the only refresh it had was in 2015 when it got these LED lights in the front and the rear, and also a big massive upgrade to the interior. So people love this car still in 2022, and I think that is incredible to think about how long this car has been around and just how important of a car this is, because this is an end of an era. I don't think we're gonna see a naturally aspirated 5.7 liter V8 like we have in the RT right here, 375 horsepower, 410 pound-feet of torque, and this is the manual, so we're gonna have a lot of fun driving it a little later in the video. But starting in the front end, we have the wide graphics. You see there are so many horizontal lines emphasizing the graphics even more, and when you're driving this car you can definitely tell that it is not really a small car. It feels big, it has a presence on the road. Even if you're sitting inside driving, you can feel the presence of this car. I think the simplicity of the proportions and the graphics all around this car, it makes this car such a timeless design. Now, looking at this car from a side view, you can definitely tell that this is a muscle car just by looking at the proportions and of course the simple lines that we have here. We have this beautiful shoulder line cutting all the way through this long body, and the door itself is massive on this car. And then you have this little upswing that is almost a carbon copy of the 60s and 70s Chargers and Challengers. And on top of that, if we were to learn to sketch cars, you know that I love to sketch cars. If I were starting out sketching cars, I think the Challenger would be a fantastic example to start to learn how to sketch cars, because you really have three boxes of this design. You have the front end, the hood, and then the greenhouse, another box which you can just cut off to create the A-pillar, and then you have the big trunk here as well, clearly defined in this box back here. So sketching this car is super easy, and if you're looking to get into car sketching, I would suggest starting with sketching a Challenger just because of the simple lines and the proportions of this car. Now, looking at the rear end graphics, I absolutely love these upgrades that they did in 2015 when it went from these light bulbs that we have, regular and not LED bulbs in the older version, and then they upgraded to these beautiful taillights that is such a clear identifier of a Challenger when you see it at night, both in the front and also in the rear with this simple graphics. It kind of follows the same philosophy as we have in the front end. A lot of horizontal lines stretching from one end to the other, and also simple graphic elements such as these taillights right here. Moving further down, we have dual exhaust. They're not round, they feel more like a muscle car exhaust. I think usually I prefer round tailpipes, but in this case I think it suits this car, the Challenger specifically, to have these kind of squared off taillights, because it feels a bit more vintage that way, in my opinion. And up top we have this spoiler on top, which I think sets off the design beautifully. It looks a little more I think more retro without this on, but in a modern version I really prefer to have this little spoiler up here, and it also houses the rear camera right there in the middle. I just had to point out this cool little Dodge Challenger that's racing around the windscreen on the outside. It's great attention to detail from Dodge. Welcome to the interior of the 2016 Challenger RT. It's very familiar in here if you've ever been in a Challenger. It hasn't really updated a lot since the big refresh in 2015. However, with that refresh, you got a whole new interior which feels a lot more quality materials, and the build quality overall just dramatically increased with the 2015 version. Before that, it definitely felt like this was a car that started its development in 2004 with the old interior. There are a lot of cool small details, retro design features in here, and also a couple of weird features that I'm gonna show you right now. For example, the parking brake isn't your normal modern handle or electric button. Instead, it's a foot pedal that you need to press all the way back. How old school is that? Then there's a gear shifter, which isn't pointing straight up. Instead, it's angled towards the driver, just like in the classic Challengers. Another detail that I love is the positioning of the door handles. Dodge could easily have moved them further up the door like most modern cars, but decided to keep it in a similar position as the original. If we look up in the interior, we see a pretty normal looking sun visor. However, this sun visor actually has a mini sun visor built into it, just to make sure it covers a few extra important inches of sunlight. There's also a pretty interesting storage compartment in the door that you can barely reach sitting in the front seats. I'm not sure what they're intended for, maybe the rear passenger, but it's still an interesting feature of the interior of the Challenger. Last but not least, there is the top of the dash. It's seriously massive. I feel like it needs its own control tower just by looking at the size of it. Have a look under the hood. This is of course the 5.7 liter V8 with 375 horsepower in this version and 410 pound-feet of torque. It's the same V8 that you find in the Ram 1500s, but in there they have 395 horsepower. So I'm not sure if that has something to do with the tune or something like that, something else, but it is in fact the same 5.7 liter V8 and 375 horsepower in this car. It feels like that's pretty much all you need for having a lot of fun, specifically in combination with the manual transmission that I have in this car. And looking at this front view, I can't get enough of these looks right here. It just looks so badass looking at it from a front view with these angry headlights and the grille and the whole wide stance of this car. And then you have this red accent, which is the RT logo in this specific trim, and you also have it saying Challenger on the other side of the grille. And moving on to the side, we have of course the Hemi logo right here on the side, beautifully done. It doesn't say V8 or anything like that. It's very subtle, very simple, and very clean as well. Other than that, there's not really a lot going on the side of this car until we get to, of course, this is one of my favorite details, the fact that it says fuel on the fuel cap right here. Such a cool little detail. Moving on to the rear, it is actually a very good GT car. Have a lot of storage space in the back. As you can see, it's a massive rear trunk for what it is, a two-door coupe. The coupe size of this is definitely bigger than, for example, the other two competitors, the Camaro and the Mustang. So if I were to going on a long trip, maybe cross country or something like that, the Challenger would definitely be my #1 choice, just because of the interior space and also this massive luggage space right here in the back. Speaking of the graphic details in the rear end, this has to be one of my favorite upgrades on any facelift that I've seen. It looks so good and clean. It's just a simple design. And I've said this before, the simpler the design you have on a car, the longer it's gonna last in time and be relevant. The design is still going to be relevant since you have such simple elements in the design, and that's a key that's one of the key elements of muscle cars, to have them be simple. And if you modernize them like this, they're still gonna look good 10, 15, 50 years from now with these simple graphics and designs that we have in specifically the Challenger. You know, the Scat Pack has that B logo, and you can see that we have some honeycomb texture on this part right here. A tiny detail that I don't think anybody really notices, but it's still a very cool little feature that you find in here that relates to something else within the model lineup. And then if we look at these vents here, you can see that all of these vents actually have a different shape to them. So this looks different from the center vents right here and from the right side vent as well. And I can't I understand why they did that. It can't be cost effective or efficient to do that, to create 4 different pieces of vents designs for the same interior. But hey, they decided to go that route anyway. This specific Challenger is equipped with, yes, we have the 6-speed manual transmission, and this is a solid transmission right here. It feels very sturdy, and I really like that we have an angle on this, which is also reminiscent of the original Challengers, that kind of invites you to grab it and go for a drive and keep shifting with this angle towards the driver. And overall, the graphics in here is all angled towards the driver. You can see that we have a cutoff right here so that the passengers aren't really a part of the driving experience. That fact is emphasized even more when you have a look at this. The storage here in the middle only opens towards the driver, so the passengers can't even see what's going on in here. It's like Dodge didn't really care about the passengers, and I really like that we have this logo on the inside. It says Dodge Brothers right here with the old logo. Very cool little detail that I also appreciate that they put in the production vehicle. All right guys, so it's time to take it out for a drive, and this is of course the 6-speed manual transmission. I feel like I've been driving more manuals the last couple of weeks than I have in the last couple of years, but I'm not complaining. First thing you notice, I don't know if this is just this Challenger or all Challengers, but the clutch, it feels like I'm gonna grow a much larger left leg if I were daily driving this car, because the clutch is pretty solid from what I'm used to. Maybe that's normal, and I kind of think that suits the, you know, the overall muscle car feel of having it be a little heavier than normal. But it's so good to be in a proper V8 manual transmission, and of course rear-wheel drive. That's kind of the magic formula, isn't it? To have a big V8 up front and then all this analog driving experience that you get with only a manual transmission. I've heard that the automatic for this isn't bad at all. It's really a smooth automatic and perfect for longer road trips. But so far, I really dig this manual transmission. It does have, the throws are a little longer than, for example, the GR86 that I just drove. But that doesn't really bother me. It feels pretty old school, and again, I think that kind of design or feeling suits this car pretty perfectly. So yeah, it goes if you really push it. It's not the fastest car in the world. It has, as I said, 375 horsepower, but the torque is always there. And one thing I want to mention with this transmission is that it's really easy to go from first to fourth. That happened to me a lot of times so far. It's kind of just slipping naturally into fourth. You kind of have to press it to the side to get it into second, but that's, you know, one of these things that you learn as you drive the car. But regarding the speed and the performance, I think this is pretty much everything you need in a fun muscle car. It doesn't have to be quicker than this. This is perfectly fine for what it is. If you don't want to have, you know, what is it, 707 horsepower Hellcat or even the Demon, this is perfectly legit. And the thing is, you can get these cars these days for $25,000, and to me that's just incredible value in my opinion. It's such a good value car for that price. A 2016, even 17s, you can get them now for $25,000, up to 30 if you want to have it in decent condition. But I really don't mind if it has a lot of miles on it. It's an easy car to maintain, and with the manual transmission, it's such a fun car to drive as well. Oh, the thing is, I didn't even realize I didn't have it in sport. So we have a sport button right here, and what that does is it kind of, if you have it automatic, it keeps the gears for longer, and it also works a little bit on the traction control. And I think you just get a more responsive throttle because it feels like it's a little snappier when you have it in sport mode. So we should have had that back there, but let's do a couple of more pulls in sport mode so you can maybe see the difference or hear the difference. then we're up to 60 there. It's pretty quick. I mean, third gear there, going from about 40 to 60, it's pretty quick. And what I really like is you can keep it in whatever gear you want, basically. As you saw back there, I started in third gear. That's just because we have the big 5.7 liter V8 up front with all that torque. So I can cruise in 50 now, and if I want to just relax and chill, I just put it in 6th gear, and we're cruising right above 1000 RPM, and we can go do I can sit in here all day. And specifically if we're on the highway, which we're gonna do in just a second, it's such a comfortable GT car. You have all the space inside, and it's not a complicated car, and I don't think it should be. And it's also not a sports car like the other two are starting to become, the Camaro and the Mustang. They feel more like sports cars these days, and they kind of try to be good at everything, which means that they're great at nothing. This Challenger is great, really great at being a muscle car. That's what it is. It doesn't try to be anything else. It doesn't try to take corners like a sports car. It's just a simple formula where you have the big engine in the front, and handling isn't the best out there, but it doesn't matter, and it's just a muscle car for the modern era. And it's the last muscle car that we have in today's world. And I don't know what the next generation is gonna be like, if it's gonna be something like this. Probably not. We're most likely gonna have at least a hybrid from now on, or even, I know Dodge is working on a full electric muscle car, so that's gonna be interesting to see how they solve that with having the typical, you know, big engine in the front and big displacement, and replacing that with an EV. And they kind of have to make something really, really special in order to make that work. Alright guys, we're gonna go out on I-95, just see how it feels in highway speeds. I have a feeling that it's gonna be very, very comfortable and stable at the highway speeds, because it is, as I said, more a GT car than a proper sports car. Of course, there's a lot of traffic these days, as you can see, but hopefully we can get a couple of pulls at least. That's the thing with the Challenger. I just love everything about this car, and specifically when you have it in a manual. It just feels, in a manual, it just feels like an old car. It's an old concept that still works today, and that still brings so much satisfaction when you're driving it, that it's gonna be really sad when these types of cars are gone and all we have are EVs and stuff. So yeah, enjoy it while you can. Specifically for $25,000, that's a deal. It's pretty windy outside today, and I can't feel the wind at all. It just feels like it can go on for miles and miles and miles without ever getting tired. And that's exactly what you want from this car, because of the looks. The face of the car, it gives an identity of every car, and this looks, as you know, very, very aggressive and angry. And he kind of says to you that it will take you wherever you need to go. It doesn't matter the weather or the wind or what have you. You can still jump in this car and enjoy it, be comfortable for thousands of miles. There is a little bit of wind noise in here. I'm not sure where that comes from, if it's from the side mirrors or from the front maybe. Not sure, but you can definitely hear some of the wind noise from the outside, inside the cabin right here. But as you can see, I'm doing 70 now, I'm in 6th gear, and I'm just in between. I'm like at 1500 RPMs. That's what I love about big displacement engines like the 5.7 in this car, the 5.7 liter V8. It's such a torque beast that you can cruise on in 6th gear, and you can probably even start the car, as I said before, in like 4th gear or something like that. It's not gonna have a problem with it. It's not the best thing for the transmission, but I think it could probably do like 0 to 100 in 3rd gear or something like that. It's definitely not as easy to get the gears in quickly as it was, for example, in the GR86. And this feels like you need to work for the gears a little bit more, and nothing that I'm really complaining about. And I'm realizing now that I've been driving it for a while that this angle of the gear shifter right here, it kind of helps with that problem that I had when I started driving this car, that I went from first to fourth like this. You kind of rest your hand more on the right side when it has this angle to it. It just makes it easier, I guess, to put it in second gear instead of jumping into fourth, and maybe that's the function of this gear shift. There we have it, my review of the 2016 Dodge Challenger, a design that's been largely unchanged for the past 18 years and still outsold the Mustang in 2021. I think that says something about this legendary car. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.